I've not been captivated by a turn-based game like this since the OG days of Final Fantasy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of Simply Honest. This is the show where I like to give you honest yet simple first impressions of various games, whether they are from indie studios or from AAAs, because I believe every game has a story to tell. And in today's episode, we are talking about the game Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, before I dive into today's review, I would like to make a preface that this review is going to be mostly discussing the entirety of the game without revealing major spoilers for anyone who's wanting to get into the game without worrying about losing major context. I believe this game is worth the play, and I believe that if you do want to get into this, I'm going to talk about my opinions about various points of the game without revealing major points of the story or the various acts. Now, the game Expedition 33 takes place in a large dystopian world where you are basically in a kind of a universe that resembles Paris and a lot of French-inspired architecture and verbiage. And this is a world where a supernatural being known as the Paintress lives all the way across the sea in a very large structure known as the Monolith. And every year, this large creature basically runs to the monolith and she writes in a magical form of paint where every year she decreases the age of people who exist in the world by 1 year. This, of course, sparks a will to survive from the worlds of all the people, where they try their best to charge at the monolith to stop the Paintress and to prevent the slow erasure of the human race. Now, this particular story takes place from the monolith. It goes all the way down to 33. This means that every single human being at the age of 33 officially gets erased and the overall existence of humanity becomes smaller and smaller. This takes place where you play as members of an expedition for 33 who are all at the age of 32, and they are experiencing a situation where they are at their final year of life, where some of them will choose to stay at home to experience life one final year, or they will go into the monolith to try to stop what's going on to attentively save the world. Now, right off the get-go, when it comes to some of my various first impressions in regards to this game, I was genuinely blown away, but also kind of taken aback in regards to some of the things that genuinely surprised me. Because personally, the concept, the idea of how this world worked was something that I thought was extremely interesting, but also very fun, because the idea of the Paintress, the monolith, and of course the erasure of the humanity in this way was something that I felt was very unique and very different to what I'm personally used to seeing in various forms of RPG storytelling worlds. One of the biggest things I will say that first jumped out at me was the fact that this game is a turn-based combat world, kind of similar to the world of Final Fantasy. Now, I have personally never had much enjoyment when it comes to turn-based games, mostly because of the issues in regards to pacing. However, I did find that the way that Expedition 33 found a way to rectify this issue for me was the fact that they made turn-based gaming a lot more engaging. A lot of other turn-based games are simply one of those situations where you're in combat and you can button mash the A button to just make the combat go faster, and there's not really much you can do in the game besides just progressing through the moves. This game, however, changes that whole situation as they incorporate the involvement of a parry and dodge system, where if you end up parrying an entire turn of attacks by your enemy, you can actually do a counterattack which does enemy damage and making the combat go a little bit faster and kind of change around the turn-based economy. This, for me, made it exceptionally more engaging, made me want to pay attention to the enemies more as I got to learn all the various attack patterns and other various forms of engaging combat throughout the game with every single enemy. And another thing that really genuinely jumped out at me was just the combination of the beautiful environments while also making some of the most breathtaking soundtracks I've ever gotten to hear in regards to a game studio, or just really in game in general. Because the backstory behind this game is honestly something really fun, because this game is a menagerie of high quality studio based content work while also using designers and even artists from things like SoundCloud in order to create an ensemble of this amazing team who have made all these really cool and amazing design works. Now, this next part, like I said previously, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent divulging into the overall plot of the game, but I still want to talk about in regards to my personal opinions of how I felt the story was. Overall, to put into a visual context, Expedition 33's story is by all means a roller coaster, not only because of the sheer emotion shenanigans that I felt throughout each of the various acts, but just because of how the pacing was. At one moment, you're in the worlds of your normal areas of the city where you're roaming around, things are happy, things are beautiful and lovely, and then it gets into a moment of just high intensity where your life is on the line and you have to do all these situations where you need to try your best to take on 30 different elements of the story. And then it goes on to some segments of the game where you're back to a more calm situation, a more calm handle, where now you get to kind of explore the world and kind of take in the smell of the roses, basically. And the emotional roller coaster that you deal with throughout the game is very fun, even in regards to just the general types of action. Just in regards to like the story itself, in my eyes, the story was extremely well made, because throughout my time of the story, I could never really guess how the direction of the story was going to be, and with each act making the story more and more intense, just the overall directions that they went through and went towards, I was just genuinely blown away, because the sheer level of just cinematic wonder with every cutscene, with every segment of the game, really kept me wanting to go through the game more and more, and to really kind of build a connection within the realms of the story. Now, of course, you are able to get into the game and kind of, for lack of a better word, speed run doing only the major parts of the game, but this game is just so alive and so diverse that there's just so many different parts of the world that I feel like if you do speedrun it, you're missing a lot of the game itself, because every single segment of the game, from the side quests to even just some of the other side objective and the side regions, all were alive with their own bits of amazing and well-created details in my eyes. Now, when it comes to some of the various future predictions that I have for this game in regards to whether or not this game could go on and do more things, I will say that at the time of this recording, the game had already released a DLC in regards to creating a fun little side quest made by one of the other NPCs named Eskia, and I think that this game has a way that it was structured that it allows you to really just dive into a different side story if they wanted to, because with all the different NPCs and all the different characters, you have a lot of ways that you could kind of create fun little side stories to add a couple extra hours of gameplay and new challenges, all without really diverting too far from the original story of the game. But the way that they made everything, in my eyes, made a lot of sense. But I will say right off the rip that this game does not need a DLC per se, because everything that they were given to us for the base game was beautiful. It was, in my eyes, very well orchestrated, and the game itself at a base level is long enough to be a genuinely good time that you don't need DLC to act as a buffer. I felt like, in my eyes, the DLC is a way of a fun side objective if you're hunting down for more either fun aesthetics or just a fun experience to make the game last longer. As we approach some of my final thoughts into this game, if you guys have not already heard about how I've described this game so far, this game became one of my top 5 greatest games of all time. It became a forever Game of the Year contender, because in my eyes, a game that is a story-centered game has to have certain things for me to really be engrossed. It has to have a soundtrack, a story that I feel is unique. It has to be engaging to a point that allows me as the player to not have to compare it to another game to justify whether or not it's good or bad. I did state that this reminded me of Final Fantasy, but only because of how the combat felt. Otherwise, everything that this game provided, in my eyes, felt unique and felt very much a fun, entertaining moment of my life that I felt was very well done, because this game is just fun. And I believe that the investment into the story is something that allows me to put this game onto one of my most preferred and most enjoyed titles that I've ever had the opportunity to play. In regards to those of you who are wondering what this game is and who is it really for, I believe that this game, depending on how you kind of look at it, can be made for just about everybody. For those of you who are looking for a high octane, high intensity kind of combat situation, I believe the turn-based combat is, yes, a little slower than what you might be willing to do, but with how the parrying and the dodging works, it does add a fun degree of momentum that I feel like if you really dedicate your time to, you can have a lot of fun with this one. And if you're just a casual RPG lover, back to the old days of Final Fantasy where it's just, you know, casual turn-based, using magic, using physical attacks, this game has that for you. And even if you're just more of a casual gamer, the game does, in my eyes, feel reasonable enough in terms of the difficulty that you can really engross yourself into the story without needing to have this freaking next level 5,000 IQ kind of, you know, understanding. Like, you can play the game in a casual sense and still get through the game and genuinely enjoy yourself. Expedition 33 for me gave me a sense of enjoyment, a sense of wonder that I have not felt in games in a very long time, especially at the time of recording. We were in a world of just near constant microtransactions, season passes, DLCs to complete the gaming experience. In my eyes, this game gave us everything that we wanted to play, but right at day one. It didn't need to be constantly curated with patches after patches after patches. Obviously, there were situations back in day one in regards to some balancing things, but at the end of the day, the game itself was complete without the need of additional purchased material. And I highly recommend this game to anyone who's looking for a really cool style game that is just a little bit different than what we are usually used to. But as always though, if you guys did end up enjoying today's review of Expedition 33, do consider liking, following, and subscribing. And if you happen to have suggestions for future games for me to review, do consider dropping them down in the comments section. But of course, if you happen to have played this game or even the DLC, let me know down in the comments section how you guys felt about the game and how you felt about your overall experience. But once again though, I've been your host, NiccoSilverado. This has been yet another glorious review of Simply Honest. This has been the game known as Expedition 33. And as always though, and forever, adios, sayonara, and goodbye.